The message arrived at 11:37 p.m. Tom Garrett was watching the dark heave of the Atlantic from their stateroom balcony, a half-finished can of beer sweating in his hand. The sea was black and enormous, a breathing entity that made the majesty of the seas, all 168,000 gross tons of it, feel like a bathtub toy. Inside the cabin, his wife, Sarah, was asleep, and their 10-year-old daughter, Lily, was a motionless lump under a crisp white duvet, dreaming of the Nassau beaches they were supposed to see in 2 days. It was peaceful, the kind of deep, humming peace you paid $4,000 for. Then came the buzz. Not just one, 3. A synchronized electronic trill that cut through the low thrum of the ship's engines. Tom's phone on the nightstand, Sarah's on her side. Even Lily's cheap little pay-as-you-go burner phone, the one she was only supposed to use for emergencies. Tom stepped back inside, sliding the heavy glass doors shut. The air conditioning hummed, a sterile counterpoint to the raw salt air outside. Sarah was already sitting up, her face pale in the dim light, blinking away sleep. "What was that?" "All of us," Tom said, his own phone now in his hand. At the same time. On the screen, stark white text on a blood-red background, was the kind of message that made the little hairs on your arms stand up. It wasn't a text. It wasn't an email. It was something more fundamental, something that had bypassed the lock screen. Emergency alert. Avoid all mirrors until further notice. This is not a drill. Shelter in place. Await instructions. Tom read it twice. He looked at Sarah, whose own face was illuminated by the same crimson glow. Her mouth was a small, perfect O of disbelief. "Avoid all mirrors," she whispered, the words sounding absurd in the quiet cabin. "What the hell's that? Some kind of prank? That sounds ridiculous." "It looks official," Tom said, turning his phone over in his hand as if the back of it might offer a clue. "Maybe it's code for something. There must be a good reason for them to send this." He was spitballing, a classic Tom Garrett trait. Find the logical explanation, no matter how far you have to reach. It was how his brain was wired. Lily stirred in her bed. "Daddy, my phone made a scary noise." "It's okay, sweetie," Sarah said, her voice a little too tight. "Just a practice drill." "A mirror drill?" Lily asked, her voice thick with sleep. The question hung in the air, simple and childishly logical. It highlighted the utter insanity of the message. A mirror drill. What did you do? Turn them to the wall? Tom tried the cabin's Wi-Fi. The icon spun for a moment before a no connection message popped up. Odd. He'd been streaming a baseball game just a few hours earlier. He picked up the cabin phone, a beige plastic thing that looks like it belonged in a 1990s office. He was met with dead air. No dial tone. Nothing. "Okay, that's weird," he said. "Phone's out. Wi-Fi's out." "Maybe it's a ship-wide thing," Sarah suggested, pulling her knees to her chest. "Maybe they're about to make an announcement." They waited. The only sound was the thrum of the engines and the gentle creak of the cabin as the massive vessel rose and fell on the unseen waves. As long as they waited, no captain's voice appeared on the intercom. There was no follow-up alert. Just a silence that was beginning to feel heavy and suffocating. Tom found himself staring at the full-length mirror bolted to the back of the cabin door. His own reflection stared back. A slightly paunchy man in a faded baseball t-shirt, his face a mask of confusion. He looked away, a prickle of unease crawling up his spine. It was stupid. It was a mirror. He'd looked at it 100 times already on this trip. But the message had poisoned it. That's when they heard the first scream. It came from the hallway, muffled by the heavy door. It was high and shrill, the sound of pure, unadulterated terror. It was a woman's voice, and it was cut off with a wet, final-sounding gurgle. Tom and Sarah froze, looking at each other. Every bit of rationalization, every half-baked theory about pranks or drills, evaporated in an instant. That sound was real. Another noise followed, a series of thuds against the nearby door. Then, the splintering crack of wood, followed by a man's shriek that was choked off faster than the first. "Tom," Sarah breathed, her voice trembling. "Lock the door." Tom was already moving, his hand fumbling with the deadbolt and the chain. This wasn't happening. This was a nightmare. They were on a floating city in the middle of the ocean, supposedly the safest place in the world. And then came the sound from their own bathroom. It wasn't a scream or a thud. It was a single, deafening crack. It was the sound of a giant stone hitting a frozen lake. A sound of immense pressure and sudden, catastrophic release. It was so loud, so close, that Lily yelped and scrambled out of her bed, running to her mother. "What was that?" Sarah cried, holding their daughter tight. "Stay here," Tom whispered, his voice hoarse. He didn't want to go. Every instinct screamed at him to huddle with his family, to become as small as possible. But the sound had come from inside their room. The danger wasn't just in the hallway anymore. It was with them. He crept towards the bathroom door, which was slightly ajar. The light was off. He pushed it open slowly. The small room was dark, but not completely. A faint, ambient light from the cabin filtered in, and it was just enough to see. The vanity mirror, a huge wall-spanning sheet of glass above the sink, was shattered. A complex web of cracks radiated from a central point, like a spider's web made of ice. But it hadn't fallen out. The pieces were all still in place, held together by the frame and whatever adhesive they used to mount these things. But that wasn't the part that made Tom's blood run cold. Something was moving in the mirror. Not a reflection. He knew what his reflection should look like in a cracked mirror. A fractured, cubist version of himself. This wasn't that. In each jagged shard of glass, something was stirring. It was a darkness. An oily, three-dimensional blackness that seemed to absorb the faint light. It wasn't reflecting the bathroom. It was containing something else. A different space. And in that space, a shape was undulating, coiling and uncoiling like a nest of black serpents. It was a deep, absolute void. A patch of anti-reality pasted onto the world. He could feel a pressure building in his head. A low hum that vibrated behind his eyes. The thing in the mirror. It felt aware. It knew he was there. He backed away slowly, struggling to take his eyes off the shifting darkness in the glass. It was beginning to push, he realized. The cracks were widening, groaning under a slow, inexorable pressure from the other side. "Tom?" Sarah's voice was a lifeline, He slammed the bathroom door shut, his body trembling. "Don't go in there," he gasped, leaning against the door as if he could hold the thing back with his own weight. "The mirror, it's broken. There's something inside it." He didn't need to explain further. The look on his face was enough. Sarah's eyes widened in terror. The silence from the hallway was gone. Now, there were more sounds. Distant screams, the crash of breaking glass. A strange, dragging, shuffling noise that seemed to be getting closer. They were trapped. The thing in the bathroom was trying to get out, and God only knew what was in the hall. "We have to go," Sarah said, her voice firm now, cutting through the panic. "We can't stay here." "But where do we go?" Tom asked, his mind racing. "The hallway." "The lifeboats," she said. "Deck 15. We have to try." He looked at the bathroom door, and then at the main door to the hallway. A choice between two monsters. He thought of the writhing blackness in the mirror, the feeling of it pressing against the very fabric of their room. The monster you know is bad, but the one trying to break into your sanctuary is worse. "Okay," he said, nodding. "Okay." An idea, born of pure animal panic, flashed in his mind. "The towel. Get the big bath towel." While Sarah grabbed the thickest towel from the closet, Tom listened at the main door. The shuffling sound was closer now, accompanied by a strange clicking noise. He peered through the peephole. The fisheye lens distorted the plush, patterned carpet of the hallway, but he could see movement. Something was dragging itself past their door, moving with an odd, jerky gait. He couldn't make out a shape. He pulled back, his eye throbbing from the strain. "Got it," Sarah said, holding out the towel. "When I open the bathroom door, just throw it over the mirror. Don't look," he commanded. He took a deep breath, turned the handle, and swung the door open. The pressure in his head intensified. The cracking sound was louder now, the shards of glass visibly bulging outward. Sarah, bless her, didn't hesitate. She flung the heavy towel with a perfect arc. It slapped against the mirror, covering the writhing horror beneath. The psychic pressure lessened instantly, the low hum in his skull fading to a dull ache. "Now," he said, turning to the main door. He unlatched the chain and the deadbolt. His hands were now slick with sweat. He put his hand on the handle. "Lily, you stay right between us. Don't look at anything but the floor, you understand? Just look at the carpet. We're going to run. Ready?" They both nodded, their faces grim. He counted to 3 in his head and pulled the door open. The hallway was a war zone. Smoke, thick and acrid, hung in the air. The emergency lights cast everything in a ghastly, flickering orange glow. Doors were smashed open. Luggage was strewn everywhere. And down the corridor, to the left, they saw it. It was one of them. The creature was tall and painfully thin, its limbs too long, bending at angles that defied biology. Its skin, if you could call it that, was the same impossible, non-reflective black as the thing they saw in the mirror. It was a hole in the shape of a man, a walking piece of the void. It was hunched over a man in a crew uniform, but it wasn't biting or clawing. It was holding him. And where its featureless head was bent towards the man, the crewman's body seemed to be dissolving, turning grey and translucent, as if his very substance was being siphoned away. Tom felt a scream build in his own throat and choked it back down. He grabbed Sarah's hand and she grabbed Lily's. "Right," he hissed. "Go!" They ran. Their footfalls were loud on the ruined carpet. They didn't look back. The ship was a labyrinth of identical corridors, and Tom's sense of direction was gone, replaced by a primal need for up. Up to the open air. Up to the lifeboats. Every reflective surface was a potential landmine. They ran past polished brass fittings that warped the horrific orange light. They averted their eyes from the glass doors of a closed-up gift shop, terrified of what they might see looking back at them. A dropped pair of sunglasses on the floor became a terrifying obstacle to be leaped over. The world had been transformed into a house of horrors, where every glance was a gamble. They found a stairwell and scrambled up, the metal steps clanging under their feet. The screams were worse here, echoing up and down the shaft. They burst out onto deck 12, the main promenade. It was chaos. People were running in every direction. More of the void black creatures were here, emerging from the plate glass windows of the Italian bistro, from the polished chrome of the slot machines in the casino entrance, from a puddle of spilled soda that reflected the strobing alarm lights. The creatures were silent hunters. They moved with a terrifying liquid speed, their long limbs pulling them along. They didn't seem to kill with violence, but with a touch. They'd corner someone, and the person's reflection, in a nearby window, in the creature's own abyssal form, would ripple and stretch, pulled away from them like taffy. The victim would then collapse, a grey, empty husk, their eyes wide and vacant. They were stealing people's reflections, stealing their souls. Tom yelled the way, pulling his family towards the stern, towards the exterior elevators he knew would take them to the pool deck, and from there to the lifeboats. The elevator lobby was a scene from hell. The polished mirror steel doors of the elevators were bulging outward, the metal groaning. From behind one, a slender black arm, thin as a reed, had punched through, its non-reflective fingers twitching in the open air. Sarah screamed, pointing towards another open stairwell. They climbed further, their lungs burning. Deck 13, Deck 14. Finally, they burst through a set of double doors onto Deck 15. The night air hit them like a physical blow, cold, salty, and tasting of freedom. But they weren't safe yet. The lifeboat deck was a pandemonium of terrified survivors. A handful of crew members were trying to maintain order, but it was a losing battle. And the creatures were here, too. One was coalescing out of a large puddle near the hot tub, its form rising from the water's reflection of the moonlit clouds. Another was unfolding itself from the big curved glass wall of the sky bar. Tom spotted a lifeboat station that was less crowded, further down the deck. "There!" he screamed. They ran, weaving through a sea of screaming, crying people. They reached the station, a huge orange boat tucked into its cradle. Tom and another man, a burly guy in a Hawaiian shirt, started wrestling with the heavy canvas cover. "I don't know how to do this," the man yelled, his voice cracking with panic. "Just pull," Tom roared back. They were getting the cover off, when one of the creatures turned its attention to them. It was the one from the sky bar, fully formed now. It moved towards them, its featureless head tilted as if in curiosity. People scattered before it. It was fast, impossibly fast. Tom's mind went into overdrive. There was no time. It would be on them in seconds. His eyes darted around, looking for a weapon, for anything. He saw it. Bolted to a nearby bulkhead was a fire extinguisher. Not a red one, a silver, chrome-plated one, polished to a mirror sheen. It was too late to worry about that now. He let go of the canvas, sprinted the 5 feet to the extinguisher, and wrenched it from the housing. It was heavy, solid. The creature was almost on top of Sarah and Lily, its long, shadowy arm reaching out. "Hey!" Tom screamed, his voice raw. The creature turned, its blank face fixed on him. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength, Tom hefted the chrome cylinder and shoved it forward like a shield, holding it right in front of the creature's face. The effect was instantaneous and bizarre. The creature recoiled as if it had been struck. Its form, which had been solid and defined, began to waver and lose cohesion. It was like black smoke in a wind tunnel. It had no reflection to give back, and the perfect curved mirror of the extinguisher seemed to create a paradox. A feedback loop of nothingness that was tearing it apart. It let out a sound, not from a mouth, but a psychic shriek that lanced through Tom's skull and dissolved, collapsing in on itself until it was just a wisp of black vapor that vanished in the sea breeze. The moment's respite was all they needed. The man in the Hawaiian shirt had the cover off. Sarah was already pushing a terrified Lily into the lifeboat. "Tom, now!" He scrambled in after them, his hands shaking, the heavy extinguisher still clutched in his grip. The other man jumped in, followed by a young couple. "The release!" Sarah shouted, pointing at a large red lever. Tom and the other man threw their weight against it. There was a groan of protesting metal, a loud clank, and the lifeboat lurched, dropping a few feet before the winches caught it. It began its slow, swaying descent towards the dark, churning water below. They were alive. They were clear. They drifted away from the hull of the Majesty of the Seas. The ship was a beautiful monster, a galaxy of lights against the black sky. But from its decks, they could still hear the faint, terrible symphony of screams. They watched as the lights on the upper decks began to flicker and die, one by one, as if the darkness was swallowing the ship whole. In the cramped, rocking lifeboat, they huddled together for warmth, the 5 of them adrift in the vast, empty ocean. Tom finally let the fire extinguisher fall to the floor with a clang. The immediate danger was past, but the terror remained, a cold, hard knot in his stomach. He looked at his daughter. Lily was crying silently, her small body racked with shivers. He reached out to pull her closer, to tell her it was going to be okay, even though he knew it was all a lie. He looked into her wide, terrified eyes, and for a single, heart-stopping second, in the tiny, perfect, liquid mirrors of her pupils, he saw it. A flicker. A brief, infinitesimal pulse of absolute, oily blackness. And he knew with a certainty that was colder and deeper than the ocean beneath them, that they hadn't escaped at all. They'd only brought the monster with them.